Our first speaker, who is a Labour member of the European Parliament representing London. He is Deputy Leader of the European Parliamentary Labour Party. He is Chair of the European Parliament Civil Liberties, Justice and Home Affairs Committee. He is Vice Chair of Stand Up to Racism, most importantly, but he's also an amazing and fantastic person. We give this guy a round of applause because he has to sit with
sympathy applause for going first. Thanks. She said, you have to go first. You're the junior person on the panel. You go on more. Thanks very much. Marine Le Pen is a member of my committee. I just want you to know that. The first Nazi elected member, we have Judith from the Linkers, you'll know this. Udo Voigt is a member of my committee. Yeah, I've got a really nice committee. Actually, it is a good committee. A lot of committed people on my committee fighting for refugee rights. But of course there are many far-right people on that committee. And I'm very proud to be here. I'm an MEP, not used to speaking to such big audiences, I have to say. Sorry, just don't take this out of my 5 minutes, this moment of awe. This is absolutely brilliant. It's brilliant. I was there when Stand Up to Racism began. I was there when all the previous movements to Stand Up to Racism began. I'm actually still on the exec, you haven't put me off yet. We're still in Europe. I'm so proud to be part of it, proud that you're all here, proud that we have a leader of the opposition and a shadow Home Secretary that are part of this movement. And I'm only going to speak for a couple of minutes. We're here because we're standing up to racism. And very often we come to polls like this and we think there is no urgency, or perhaps the urgency is not so great. But we've had a week when, as we were in the workshops, and I'm sure your workshop was like our workshop, where we have seen nothing less than the mainstreaming of racism in our society here and across the European Union, and indeed globally, as we see Trump and his populism in the United States, but globally a mainstreaming of racism. In our country today, not Denmark with its jewellery law taking jewellery from refugees, but here, a Home Secretary listing workers based on nationality. But it was people power, people in this room, and people who said we will not have that in our country. But that was the same civic society and people in the grassroots in Poland against Kaczynski who wouldn't have the abortion law. It was the same civic society that ensured 45% of people turned out virtually nothing that would allow a legal referendum result against Orban and the hatred of refugees in Hungary. But that won't last unless we stay united. It won't last through the Le Pen election of 2017, when it is entirely possible that you could have a fascist president of France. And it won't last through all the challenges we have. I was on the border of Syria just a few days ago. The refugee crisis will not stop, the suffering will not stop anytime soon. And even when Syria stabilises, the refugee movements will continue. And the Daily Mail will not have Europe to blame. It will be difference, it will be the challenges of people turning on each other. And those challenges are the challenges of fighting racism. So let's be clear, they are more complex, deeper, more sophisticated. And a Stand Up to Racism movement requires to meet those challenges, as they did in Hungary and Poland in the last few days, and as they have to do in Parliament and across Europe. So we have these challenges, that's why we're here. And the energy in this room and in those workshops was extraordinary. A real understanding. And I'll just finish on this. Somebody in one of our workshops said, you remember 1979? And I do. I remember all the things that were said, and I will not forget those things that were said at the Conservative Party conference this week about foreign doctors. When my family came here to Scotland, you can still hear the accent, I haven't got rid of it. And we came to our code, and I finish on this, my 1 minute. And in my 1 minute, let me tell you, Dundee was quite cold when we arrived. But one of the things I remember when our family came from India was how the racism was applied to Indian doctors, and how extraordinary to hear that again in 2016. Indian doctors and foreign doctors, how extraordinary. Britain in 2016, difference, racism, antisemitism, Islamophobia. We're absolutely right to be in this hall, absolutely right to fight anti-racism at every level. Good for you, let's get on with it. Thank you for being here.
I'm co-chairing this session. I'm Steve Hart, Vice Chair of Standing Up to Racism. And first of all, can I thank Claude. Isn't it wonderful to have an MEP, as I do, for London, that stands up for us and stands up for our communities like that? Thank you, Claude. First of all, could I just give an apology from Kate Ossamore, who's listed to speak. Kate is, in fact, who's just been reselected as a member of our Labour Shadow Cabinet, and how wonderful it is that we have a Shadow Cabinet now that reflects our people, that looks like Britain. Isn't that wonderful? Okay, she's doing really important work. She's in Turkey at the moment, observing a trial arising out of the coup and so on, so she can't be with us today. But our next speaker is Judith Bender, who is an executive member of Die Linke, the European Left Party executive in Germany, which has had a few issues around refugees, of course, and is an active campaigner against racism. She set up School Without Racism, School with Courage, and co-founded Youth AG for Integration, Acceptance and Tolerance. Judith.
Thank you very much, dear comrades and friends. This week marks the 26th anniversary of the reunification of Germany. However, I would say there's not much to celebrate. While the emphasis is put on unity, the reality looks very different. The political right is on the rise, poisons the political and societal climate with racist, anti-immigration discourse, and thus divides the society. 1 year now before the federal elections in Germany, we can really observe a polarization of society. It's really growing. By now, the 2013 founded party, the Alternative for Germany, AfD, has gained representation in 10 out of 16 state representations. And we see that they even reach higher amounts, higher percentages than Merkel, the Chancellor Party. The AfD is even predicted to become Germany's third biggest party, surpassing my party, the German Left, Die Linke, and the Greens. And we see, when we look back, that the AfD began as a mainly right-wing Eurosceptic party, and now, of course, it's focusing on the migrant issue. Germany has roughly 1 million migrants who entered last year, and by the way, it's very interesting that racism is highest in areas with the lowest immigration and refugee population. We have to note, however, that the AfD hasn't suddenly brought racism into Germany. There has been, of course, an ongoing racist current for years, which turned towards anti-Muslim racism, and of course, especially after 9/11. 10 migrants were murdered between 2000 and 2007 by a Nazi terrorist group, the National Socialist Underground. And this is even possible in 2007 in Germany. This is incredible. There are regular Pegida demonstrations in my country, and we've had big counter-demos, but particularly, and this I have to say, particularly in Eastern Germany, there have been constant mobilization by the far right, and we are not yet successful. The political right uses refugees, Muslims, migrants as scapegoats. And we have to resist, and I have to say, refugees are not responsible for housing shortage or miserable wages. decades, refugees are not the cause of our social or economic problems. But on the contrary, we have to say that many are fleeing from wars, many are fleeing from NATO military intervention in which Western states are strongly involved. In 2015, more than 1,000 xenophobic acts of violence have been registered in Germany. And this means, on average, 3 incidences per day. At a certain point, the National Council of Muslims had to switch off its telephone system because it was receiving so many insulting phone calls and hate emails that it couldn't work anymore. And you might know, I mean, I'm coming from a socialist, from a left party where we read Marx and Lenin. And Lenin once said, if German revolutionaries storm a train station, they buy a ticket beforehand. It is true that the mobilization in my country develops rather slow, but however, something is moving, and this is good news of today. So luckily, we see that huge numbers of refugee welcome initiatives are growing. More and more people are starting to mobilize against AfD, and we set up a nationwide alliance, which is, this is nice, which is also called Stand Up to Racism. And let me just finish by saying, I think it is very necessary that our fight against racism, against xenophobia, is linked with criticism and with a fight against our capitalist system. Because this is linked, and we see that capitalism needs racism, and we really need to fight this together. And in the workshop just some minutes ago, a comrade asked, but what about parties actually? Maybe parties nowadays don't play a role. We have so much civil mobilization, civil movements. And I would finish by quoting a phrase of, which is often used in Spain. And they say, 1 foot in parliament, 1,000 on the street. And I hope with this spirit we go back to our countries, to our areas where we live, and we fight racism all together. Unity is what we need. Stay strong and stay together.
Thank you very much, Judith. I'd now like to introduce our next speaker, who is a councillor based in Athens. He is coordinator of the movement against racism and the fascist threat, Kiefer, in Greece. Kiefer campaigns in solidarity with migrants, refugees, and also campaigns against the Golden Dawn fascist organisation in Greece. As you know, Greece has been at the centre of the refugee crisis, with the EU-Turkey deal and the mass deportations of refugees from Greece to Turkey, and they've been hugely involved in the trial of Golden Dawn members. So I'd like you all to please give a very warm welcome to Petros Konstantinou.
Okay, thank you very much for the invitation. I came to a country where Theresa May says that she will push for more restrictions against the migrants and the refugees. I mean, how it is possible to speak about that when Cameron and all the leaders of the European Union, they close the borders, they send Frontex in the Aegean Sea, they send even NATO in the Aegean Sea, and they are responsible for the murder of thousands in the Mediterranean. They don't want more drowned. They have already blood on their hands because they are having a war in the Middle East, in Africa, in Asia, and we have to stop the war. And also, of course, we have to stop all these leaders who are racist, and we have to confront them. This is why we're here. I came from Greece, where the last year we were very proud to have a mass solidarity movement that opened the borders. Thousands and hundreds of thousands of refugees managed to come to Europe because of this back of the mass movement. This back was not only from Greece, but also from thousands of activists, trade unionists who came until the islands, saved lives, and we joined a common struggle to fight against racism. It is amazing that in Greece, where the people, they lost their salaries, pensioners lost their pensions, you could have grandmothers giving milk to the children of the refugees, helping the women, and also having pensioners giving their pension to feed the refugees. We are very proud about this movement. And this is an answer to all the leaders who say, we don't have money for the refugees, we don't have money for the migrants, and close the borders. We are very angry against them, and there is the alternative to them. The alternative is that we have to open the borders. In Europe, we have 11 million empty houses. This is the housing crisis. This is a real housing crisis. We can give all these houses to refugees and to homeless people. We have a problem in Europe of cuts in the hospitals. We need money for the hospitals. We need more nurses, more doctors. This is the way to solve the problems. And the problems are not arising because the refugees are coming. When the refugees and the migrants are coming, there are solutions for the workers and for people who are fighting for a better society. And we have this experience. The migrants and the refugees, they become a part of the movement in Greece, demanding not only the opening of the border, but also for better conditions in schools. The last month, there is a campaign in Greece, and you know that we have a Syriza government. We don't have a neoliberal government. The campaign is to open the schools for the refugees who want to stay in Greece. Unfortunately, the government decided to create separate classes for the refugees and the children in classes in the afternoon. So we have to go on, we have to fight for all the rights that the refugees. It is not only the fight for opening the borders, but it is also the fight to open the cities, to open the schools, to open the neighborhoods. People in Greece, they open their hearts, and together and united with trade unions, we are fighting for more people to be in the schools, in the hospitals, and so on. This is our alternative. We can fight against them, and this is the real alternative that we face. We face the leaders of the European Union who decided to stay on an agreement between Turkey. That means that in Greece we have 40 camps outside the cities. We have unaccompanied children, thousands of them, who are in prison with no education, no psychological support. We have deportation, mass deportations to Turkey, and they are even discussing now, and they had a meeting in Brussels, to deport all the Afghan refugees, because they say the crisis in Afghanistan is over. And they say that Turkey is a third safe country, so everybody can be deported there. This is a shame for the European Union and the governments who are moving to deportation of refugees, of people who try to escape the bombing in Aleppo, in Syria. This is the only thing that they can offer. And it is not only for the Afghans, also for the Syrians. They're deporting them without even examining their rights. And this is happening in this period. So for us, it is very important to build an international movement of solidarity with the refugees, and also a movement in our country to go on and impose what it is the alternative solution. We need a society where everybody is different and it is not afraid of that. This is our main fight. And also we have to fight against the fascists and the Nazis. All these policies, they are opening the way for the fascists and the Nazis around Europe. The Nazis and the fascists and the far-right parties, they just say, okay, these who are now on government, they are not the real one. We are the real one. And they are going for attacks, they are murdering refugees, they are bombing their shelters and so on. So for us, it is a big challenge now that we have the Golden Dawn, the neo-Nazis. They are on trial after the explosion of a big movement, after a general strike of the Public Workers Union and the huge demonstration in 2013. They are now in a trial. The trial goes for more than 1 year and a half, but it is very important to cancel the plans of Golden Dawn, because all around Europe it was the first party of the far right that they operated very openly with violence, with open hatred against refugees, with murders, and they have the target for power and electoral strategy. We want to cancel all this, we want to stop them, and what is happening in the last months in the islands, it's a new provocation. They try now to exploit the agreement between European Union and Turkey that says that the refugees should be trapped in the islands. They cannot move. And now they're creating committees and they are attacking refugees. Today and the next week, it is days of mass demonstrations of the workers' unions and solidarity movement against the fascists in the islands. And I think that we can move all together. It is very good that in Germany now we have stand up to racism. We can move for a coordinated international action against racism. We want to bring down Fortress Europe, to open the borders, to achieve the right of refugees. And I think that on 18th of March next year, we can go for a united European and international struggle.
Thank you, Petros. The next speaker hardly needs introduction. She is the General Secretary of the University Lecturers Union, the UCU. The UCU has consistently campaigned against racism, and Stand Up to Racism is proud to have UCU as one of our supporting unions. Sally Hunt.
Thank you everyone. And I just wanted to say on behalf of my union how very proud we are to be associated and work with Stand Up for Racism, and that we send our solidarity, our thanks and our applause for what has happened today. Look at us. We are what this country is. We are against racism. We are all people. What is wonderful about what is happening today is it is the best answer we can give to a week where we had Tory bile coming out from Birmingham, separating people, frightening people, demonising people. That is not what our country is about. That is not what we will stand for. What we will stand for is solidarity, internationalism, and pride and respect in the multicultural society that we live in. Everyone in this country is welcome. Everyone has a voice. Everyone has a place. And we, in my trade union, in the trade union movement, in all of our unions, have to stand up and be that voice. And we have to be proud to do it. I wanted to talk about what has been happening in colleges and universities. I wanted to talk to you about the Prevent strategy. I've talked about it many times. I know many of you know about it, but I want to talk about it again here because I want you to understand why it is so important that we in education oppose what is taking place. We have a government that has asked us to report on our students. We have a government that has asked us to stigmatise some students because of who they are, where they come from, and what they look like. We have a government that has tried to say that we, as teachers, be it in schools, colleges or universities, have to be the front line to stop young people being able to express themselves, to challenge opinion, to ask and to argue and to say what they feel, for fear that if they do, they will be reported. And we will never agree to do that. And we want to be clear. There is a reason for this. We know that if we start letting that kind of poison into classrooms, into lecture theatres in this country, what we do is we start allowing racism through the door. That is what that would mean. Because the moment we stay silent, the moment we say it is not for us to stand up and say no, the moment that we say it is not our fight, the moment we say it is not our community, the moment we say it is not our institution, the moment we say it is not for us to be the voice, that is when we will allow those arguments into the hearts and the minds of everyone that we are meant to be educating. And we can never, ever accept that, and we never will. And when we look at what is now taking place after Brexit, where I now have to sit and listen to a Home Office minister tell me that only good universities are going to be allowed to have overseas students. Only good universities are going to be allowed to have funding which will allow them to make sure that they carry on international research with good European colleagues. Only good researchers and teachers from within the European Union are going to have some sense that they have security and tenure within this country. And I link that with the same government that says that we have to tell students when and what they're allowed to say and feel safe to explore. And I know that what we have here is a government that is trying to use education, use classrooms to put in place a right-wing ideology that is wrong, and we have to fight every step of the way. And I know that because at the same time as that is happening, I know in 2 weeks' time our government is going to be culpable with what will happen in Calais. Absolutely culpable. In our schools, our colleges, our trade unions, and in our communities to stand up, yes, for what's happening in our own country, but also to speak for what is going to happen in our name. Let's be clear about this, in our name, in Calais, to people who are not going to be able to defend themselves. So what I would like to ask you to do from today, if you're not in a trade union, join. If you are in a trade union, start being active on the anti-racist agenda. And make sure that our voices are ones that are there in solidarity with people who do not have a voice themselves. Make sure that the message that goes out from today is one that says, we will not accept racism, we will not accept prejudice, and we will stand up and fight with any who are willing to do that. I bring you solidarity from my union, I bring you thanks from all those that we teach, because by being here, you give everyone who can't be here and who is frightened and scared by this right-wing government hope, and that is what we will do. Time and time again, let's fight, let's show solidarity until we win. Thank you.
The next speaker is someone who's been described as the most prominent woman in British public life, and she's played a crucial role both nationally and locally to unite communities together against all forms of racism, Islamophobia and antisemitism. She's head of the Birmingham Stop the War Coalition and a spokesperson for Birmingham Central Mosque. Salma Yaqub.
Yeah, it's so good to be here. It just feels like the last couple of months have been extra crazy, like it wasn't bad enough. But post-Brexit, the doors have been opened to absolutely naked racism, I would say. And hearing the different speakers, what's important to note is this is not just about rhetoric or hypothetical situations. The poison is here. It's already here. We just heard about the Stop the War conference. It's 15 years since the decision to bomb Afghanistan this week. And many of us were on those demonstrations saying, not in our name. And we predicted then that not only would we see the bombing of innocent people abroad, but we would see an attack on civil liberties right here at home and an increase in racism. And that has now been compounded by the economic failures of the elite. In the name of austerity, we have seen huge cuts in public spending, and that too has been blamed on immigrants and Muslims. So I am a bit of an unfortunate situation, and remarkably I'm to blame being the daughter of an immigrant. My parents came from Pakistan, I was born here, my kids are born here, and I happen to be Muslim. But if you're to believe the mainstream, I'm responsible for the crisis in the NHS. It's got nothing to do with the chronic underfunding for decades, even though it's still the most efficient national health in the world. Me and people who look like me are also to blame for the low wages in this country. Sorry about that. nothing to do with exploitative employers and the fact that governments are prepared to prop them up with tax credits, paying for that. Let's not ask for anything as radical as a living wage. Let's just bash the immigrants and Muslims instead. And I think I'm also to blame for the housing crisis. Sorry about that too. We've just been taking all of those houses. Again, nothing to do with landlords who can take £21 billion of taxpayers' money in housing benefit. But let's not build affordable housing because it might affect the market and bring down house prices and actually make housing affordable. It's my point. And so it is the weakest in our society, those who actually don't have much of a voice, who are being targeted for blame. And it seems ludicrous when you actually look at the facts. But the sad reality is hundreds of thousands of people are facing economic uncertainty. They are struggling to have a job which pays for their real needs. They are struggling to have a house or a roof over their heads. And this government, and other governments now in Europe as well, are quite brazen. And it's quite deliberate. I don't think it's accidental. I think it's very much part and parcel. Just as with imperialism, they needed a scapegoat. And we're out there fighting all those Muslims and making us safer, by bombing people abroad. It's the fault of the foreigner that we're having all these problems. Whereas actually it is a failure of the economic elites. It's a failure of neoliberalism, just as the increase and fear on the street of the failure. And it's important, I think, to be clear about those links, because it can get confusing. Because as I said, people are facing real hardships. And that in that distraction, I call it a weapon of mass distraction, this whole obsession with foreigners and immigrants. The secret, of course, is that they need more immigration, not less, in this country for the economy. And they know this, but they've deliberately allowed this rhetoric to carry on. But the antidote to these lies, to this fear-mongering, to this bullying, is this. It is unity. It is humanity. It is a refusal to be divided, because it is the divide and rule approach. And it can be effective. That's the frightening thing. We just heard a very powerful speech by somebody who knows the realities of where hate speech leads. The Holocaust is in living memory. And people parade it as if, oh, well, it's just in the history books. But fascism is stalking Europe again. And you'd think they'd have learned the lessons. But no, I don't think they have. We have an economic crisis and there's scapegoating going on. We have wars around the world and there is scapegoating going on. And we have a media in this country, to its shame, is actually providing news. And it's not just about the 1930s and 40s, and we have to be absolutely adamant and strong in standing against antisemitism. But with the current Islamophobia, you can also look at it in terms of Srebrenica. Maybe many people here won't even remember Srebrenica, but I remember it. 21 years ago, thousands of Muslims in Europe, who happened to be white, not even brown like me, were killed. And it wasn't because of the economic crisis, it was an identity crisis. And that's what we're seeing today, because I've been told this scarf actually is causing real confusion to people of European descent. And they're so confused about their identity and so oppressed and so fearful of who they are that we really must stop covering ourselves. And we need police at the beaches to ensure that we have that. I'm going to end on a positive because it's really important, because I need hope and you're bringing me hope. And the hope always lies in ordinary people. This week also marks the 80th anniversary of the Cable Street revolt. That was ordinary people standing up against the mainstream. And yes, we do finally have an opposition leader in the mainstream who's unapologetically standing for immigrants and standing against war and destruction around the world. So please carry on. Please stick together. we will have victory. Thank you.
Thank you, Salma. Before I introduce our next speaker, I'd like to send a message to Mark Sawatka, the General Secretary of the PCS Union, because he is currently in hospital, being looked after by the diverse workforce in the NHS. And we'd like to say get well soon, Mark. And before I introduce the next speaker, I'd also like to read out his statement of support to the conference, because he was due to speak. I am sorry I can't be with you at your national conference on Saturday. As you may be aware, I'm currently in hospital awaiting a heart transplant, and so I'm unable to attend this weekend's event, but I want to pass on solidarity and support. PCS has a strong history of campaigning against racism and fascism, and we stand proudly against the racism and intolerance that dominated the campaign in the run-up to the EU referendum, and that has manifested in hate crimes and abuse following the announcement of the referendum result. Now more than ever, it is vital we build a campaign against racism, one that not only combats the hateful rhetoric in our media and society, but also addresses the causes of social division and fear that creates an environment for such rhetoric, fighting the government's cuts and austerity. So get well soon, Mark, and he's watching us on his iPad. Give it away. Our next speaker is here representing the Rotherham 12 campaign. This campaign is very important because they are fighting to overturn the wrongful arrest of 12 Muslim men who were subject to violent attacks by far-right and fascist activists 2 years ago. So please give a very warm welcome to Mubin Hussain.
Comrades, friends, firstly, thank you to Stand Up Racism for having me here today. And I think, first of all, I think they need a round of applause for having such an excellent national conference here today. So a round of applause for Stand Up Racism. And also solidarity for having campaigns like what we're working on in Rotherham here today. When I talk about Rotherham, let me take you through the brief history. Because whenever I talk about Rotherham, there is an elephant in the room, especially when a Pakistani Muslim man is standing, not in this room, but maybe some of those people are listening at home. In Rotherham, in 2014, when Alexis J. brought her report to find the harrowing and the horrific child sexual abuse scandal that took place in Rotherham, we were all horrified. Everybody in the local community was shocked and horrified by what we saw. But when these revelations came out, let me make it clear for some people that may not know, we didn't stay at home, we didn't bury our hands in the sand, we came out with the local community, the whole community, and we condemned these vile criminals completely. In fact, we went further, we rallied against these criminals. In fact, we held conferences, we held confrontations, and we came out loud and clear against these criminals. You will never ever see far-right fascists come out and campaign and rally against Jimmy Savile, but we came out against it with no ifs and no buts. We did that clearly. But what the media may not tell you, because after that, the media frenzy stopped. But what in Rotherham happened was a rise in Islamophobia to a standard I'm telling you I've never ever seen before. We had Muslim women that were walking in the town centre that were being spat at. Muslim women that stopped entering the town centre because they were fearful to go in there. We had 13 far-right demonstrations within a year. Almost week after week, far-right demonstrators would come. We've seen a mosque that was broken into. We've seen a mosque with a pig's head. We've seen a mosque that got a threat for a bomb. We've seen another mosque that was attacked. We saw women that were attacked. We've seen a taxi driver put onto life's edge. We've seen ordinary people being abused and attacked with Islamophobic rhetoric, to the extent that it all ended with the death and the martyrdom of Mohsin Ahmed. 81-year-old Mohsin Ahmed was walking home, or walking to the mosque for morning prayers, and he was murdered for no other reason than being a Muslim. The same extremism that killed Mohammed Salim in Birmingham, the same extremism that killed Joe Cox, and a different type of extremism that killed Lee Rigby, but an extremism killed Mohsin Ahmed. But you know what? Silence was left in Rotherham. Silence was left in Rotherham. So after 13 demonstrations and a rise in Islamophobia to the extent that an elderly man was murdered, we came out. And you know when we came out? Just as those that came out on Cable Street 80 years ago, we were those brave men and women defended their towns. We had 12 men that also defended our towns against vile fascists that were out there to spew their hatred. And now they are facing heavy charges. I say to you, conference, I say, come and stand with us. The media have left us. In fact, when we boycotted South Yorkshire Police because they wouldn't listen to us, when we drew up with the politicians an amendment to stand up and be heard, in fact, when we said that we wanted to put in a joint statement that Mohsin Ahmed is a victim, that those people that are facing Islamophobia are also a victim, the local politicians turned around and said, sorry, we can't call them victims because victims in this town only mean people that have been affected by the child abuse scandal. We can't see, when Mohsin Ahmed can't be seen as a victim and those that stand in self-defense are seen as guilty, we need our comrades to come out and stand with us. And I end with this. If not us, then who? If not now, then when? Thank you very much.
This is a fantastic turnout today, as we said earlier. Very broad turnout of people, and that is what has characterised this movement, Stand Up to Racism and Unite Against Fascism. It unites people across the board, across politics, only united in two things. You know, my dad was at Cable Street 80 years ago, and I'll be marching tomorrow to commemorate that and what people did there. And what he always used to tell me, there's two principles that I learned from him. One is, you never stand back when there's racism, you stand up and oppose it. You never walk to the other side of the street, you intervene, you deal with racism. And the other thing, when you're combating racism and fascism, you look for the broadest unity, and you fight with the broadest unity, because that's the only way that you defeat them. I'm a member of the Labour Party. The next speaker, Wayman, isn't. But I really welcome the fact that we've got that kind of unity right across the board, and we should celebrate that. Savvy and Wayman as co-conveners. The work they do is just unbelievable, often with not a lot of thanks, and we ought to really thank them for what they do for our movement, because they coordinate a lot of this stuff. They make a lot of things. So, with that, the next speaker is the co-convener Stand Up to Racism. Wayman Bennett is one of the leading figures in the anti-racist and anti-fascist movements in Britain. He organises protest rallies, vigils, lobbies, and public meetings and a lot else across the country to ensure our movement is always there to challenge racism and fascism at every turn. Wayman.
Thank you so much. I want to start by thanking what a great set of speakers that covered the breadth of resistance against what's happening. But you know, the last speaker, it's not a surprise. It's the South Yorkshire Police that gave us Hillsborough, that gave us Albury, tells us something about when we talk about fighting a common enemy. And as for enemies, I want to talk about Theresa May, cultural appropriation. Because she took a song called A Change Is Going to Come. A change is going to come. She stole it from Sam Cooke, because Sam Cooke wrote that song because he was refused entry, because he was black, under the civil rights. He wrote that song for a real change. And these people take it to do the exact opposite. You see, when we say a change is going to come, it's because on that banner it says, stand up to racism, stand up to Islamophobia, and stand up to anti-Semitism. When they say a change is going to come, it's exactly the opposite. And this language is the reason why we're in this room. Because part of the problem is our message is not heard. We're told all the time to accept what's going on. I was on the Nick Ferrari show, and he said, I want to talk about immigration. And I said, every time you say immigration, I'm going to say cuts austerity. Every time you say cuts austerity. He said, people are worried about immigration. I said, cuts austerity, housing, jobs. They're worried about these things. The question is, who's to blame? And then the other thing I was brought on to do was to talk about somebody taking a parody of Diane Abbott. And they told me I had a comedy bypass. And I said I refuse to suspend my disbelief about the way that the media treats people over Islamophobia, over anti-Semitism, and over racism when it comes onto these questions. We have to come together because the reason why they're using it is, in the good words of Emperor Tiberius, divide and rule. If you want to conquer people, you divide and rule. And, you know, I think that when you listen to it, I remember my mother told me she came here as a nurse to work inside the NHS. She saved people's lives. Nobody ever looked up to her and said to her, where are you from? I've had a heart attack and I want to be treated by an English person. They never did that. They said they wanted solidarity. And we have to come together to say why we can win. You see, I was on a demonstration this week. Stand Up to Racism was asked by Polish women to come and join their demonstration in London because they wanted to fight for the right to abortion. Don't tell me that demonstrations and strikes don't work. Because those women... But we have a job at hand. 5.4 million so-called foreign workers have been told that they're not going to have rights here. And that, for us, is a massive test and a massive throwing down the gauntlet. Because our message is this: they're welcome here. Refugees are welcome here. Was the first group to go, and we went with Clear actually, Clear for Canada. We should give her a big round of applause for the work. And when they closed the camp, part of the camp, 120 children went missing. Do not tell me we live in a civilized society where one of the richest countries on earth will not give any sustenance to those children. So we want to demonstrate on the 14th and the 15th. We want to make sure that our voices are heard. And the reason why we need to stand up to racism is because when we're organised, we've got a chance to defeat them. And you can see who the enemy is. Yesterday, I was told, or the day before, there was a man who gave somebody a right hookum or a left hookum. I'm glad that they're doing our work for them. I wasn't sad. Inside this country, he'd have been met by diverse people who wants to chuck out. So the hell with you, and the hell with power. I want to end this message. Or when you've gone into the work, this is not a conference just to talk, actually. This is a conference to organise. Because if you listen to what they're really worried about, they are worried about this. They are worried about a coalition coming together of black and white people, of Muslims and Christians and Jews, of the trade union movement, of the left, coming together in large enough numbers to say who is to blame. Because they've already decided who's to blame. If we stop that, there's a bigger prize. You see, I wasn't sad, I know I'm not allowed to swear, when Cameron went. I called him the Tory pigfucker. I'm glad that he went. Right? The truth is, we have to stand up to racism in every town. You see, when there was a demonstration When a woman lost her child, we had a demonstration there. When they tried to burn down the mosque in Edinburgh, we had a demonstration. Everywhere we went, we had a demonstration to show that we're the majority and we can organise to resist those people who tried to attack us. We buried the BNP. Nick Griffin was not part of the We buried the EDL. Our biggest job is to make sure there's an anti-racist atmosphere where they can't come back. And that's why we need a mass movement. We need an organisation that can do it. Join us, organise, you're the leadership, we can defeat Theresa May and we can unite our class and our people and make sure that we aren't divided. Stand together and join. Let's fight.